Great. So again, my name is Amanda Castellone, the president of South Carolina Nats. I'd like to welcome you all to our 2021 Spring South Carolina Nats workshop. We are thrilled today to have Dr. Kristen Wunderlich and Dr. Jeremy Mims with us to present creating a cadence of commutuality, finding connection in our singing communities. So, as a quick introduction, I'd like to show you all or tell you all some wonderful information about our two participants and our two presenters today. So, Dr. Kristen Wunderlich is a South Carolina Nats member, former officer. She has done everything with South Carolina Nats, and we appreciate her service to the organization so much. She holds a bachelor's degree from Luther College and master's and doctoral degrees from University of North Texas, where she focused her dissertation on the song cycle, The Prairie Songs, written by American composer Philip Wharton, and she premiered that cycle in 2006. At Winthrop, Dr. Wunderlich teaches voice, diction, art song, literature, and vocal pedagogy, and she is a dramatic soprano and active in both oratorio and opera. And she has been a finalist and semifinalist in multiple prestigious competitions. She's a big proponent and studies historical vocal pedagogy, where she has done a lot of traveling and research in this field. She has won grants to study vocal pedagogy, including a NATS award called the Emerging Leaders Award. And she has also presented a topic called Big is Beautiful at the NATS National Conference in Chicago. So she has done lots of research in this field with big voices, large voices, just like hers, and we are grateful that she is working on that, including work on maturing and aging voices as well. Um, she, like I said, Dr. Wunderlich is active in NATS, sending students to district, regional, and national competitions, and we are grateful to have her here today. Presenting with Dr. Wunderlich is Dr. Jeremy Mims, who is one of Dr. Wunderlich's colleagues at Winthrop. He is an assistant professor of music there, where he's the director of choral activities. He teaches multiple choirs, including the chorale, chamber singers, and collegiate choir, and he teaches conducting as well. He holds numerous positions within the community, like playing for choirs and orchestras in various churches, and all of his ensembles do very, very well. And he is a frequent clinician in the area. He is also a conductor, collaborative pianist, violinist, and a tenor. So he is multi talented. And we appreciate his service as someone that plays for South Carolina Nats singers at their audition days. He is active in the American Choral Directors Association, and he is presented with that community at the regional and national conventions. And he is currently researching the works of Mexican Baroque composer Miguel Mateo Dayo y Lana. So I hope I did both of you justice with those quick, very, very fast bios, but we are glad to have you both today. And please welcome Dr. Kristen Wunderlich and Dr. Jeremy Mims.
Thank you. Thanks for having us today. And Jeremy and I have talked about doing a presentation like this for many years. And so just having the wonderful extension of an invitation to do this spurred us to actually get this work done. So I am so thankful that to have a wonderful colleague like Jeremy. And as we know, work in the voice studio and work in the choral classroom is sometimes contentious, and I'm blessed that I don't have a contentious relationship with Dr. Mims. I guess I can just say it. We want to always put the students and the students' needs first, and we believe that they can do both things, and they should do both things. I will talk a little bit about my journey in our presentation today. But I went to a choral school, and Luther College is a school that has right now about 8 choirs. It had 6 when I was there. And I had a rocky road as an undergrad student. Didn't really feel like I fit into the choral situation there, never made the top choir of Nordic choir, and probably still have some emotional baggage from that. But my struggles as a singer in my undergrad, I think helped me as a teacher and to help my students who might be having some of the same struggles that I had. One of the things beautiful that was brought to me in the past couple of years is singing under the direction of Anton Armstrong at Von Clarken Music Conference. And just watching him work and seat a choir. And in fact, in one of our rehearsals, he pointed to me and said, "Look at this voice. Listen to this voice. Anyone would be so happy to have this voice in their choral ensemble." Well, I'd gone through my whole undergrad thinking that I didn't have a voice in Nordic choir. So that was an eye-opener to me that we can serve all sizes and shapes of our singers well in the choral ensemble. And so I think what we want to maybe help you think about today is how we can work together, how we need to have better conversations with each other, and we need to not put our students in the middle of choosing either or, because it can be a beautiful both relationship. So, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, as we've been having conversations, talking about solo singing versus choral singing, we'll get into some of that. And, I think there's less about that and more about being a singer. And so we are using our voice in a variety of contexts, but it's the same voice, and finding a way that we can support one another, and where my ensembles can be, our ensembles can be a lab situation and the application of what we're doing in the studio. And so just furthering the conversations, I think, between us. And let me know, is it PowerPoint? You guys are able to see that? Did I do that correctly? Awesome.
Okay.
We see it on presenter view.
Well, I'm not smart enough to that's where it's gonna be. That's okay. We're just gonna
We
be
like presenter view.
that's where we are. Um,
So I think the first slide is our Winthrop choral, our Winthrop chorale in front of Burns, which is the front entrance to our campus. And I love looking at this picture because I know every student here, but it also makes me sad because I've missed them so much, and seeing them in this unmasked way. It's kind of emotional to see that picture.
yeah.
So the first slide is about the responsibilities of the singer, voice teacher, and choir or opera director, conductor are intertwined in the vocal education of university-age singers. And we were just talking informally before this presentation started this afternoon about something beautiful that our band director said yesterday in our music department meeting, about how our students come to us in college, and most of them, and especially at Winthrop because we are so focused on music education, these high school students think they're going to major in choir or band or orchestra in the large ensemble. But here's our band director saying, we owe it to them when they come to learn, to teach them about music, to teach them about music theory, to teach them about music history, to hone their skills in their private voice lessons, and how all those things are fusing together to, as you said, make the singer instead of the either or. So that's why I included this quotation. I thought it was a great reminder that all of us have responsibilities. I have a responsibility as a voice teacher to help my students sing better in his ensemble. He has a responsibility to help his students sing better in their voice lessons. It's this beautiful conversation with each other.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, then often in the choral setting can be the application of all of those things at once. We can bring in the music history and the performance practice. Hey, it's okay to know that you're on a dominant chord right now in theory, but then we're also using our studio voice. All of that happens, or should happen, in this setting.
The next slide I just created because it shows both of us in our elements. And so how can our work together be mutually beneficial, and how can our students not get caught in the middle? Because we don't want our students to feel that there is conflict between us that puts them right in the middle of of whatever's happening with us.
That's right.
If I have a problem with something that my student is doing in a choral ensemble, I need to go to him and talk to him. Perhaps this person, what do you think, should be singing this part?
Mm-hmm.
Or he should be coming to me, hey, I've noticed that this person in your studio is getting very easily vocally fatigued. What's going on with them? So we're having this conversation. So here he is at the left conducting in Burns, our big hall that's been closed for a few years.
Right.
And on the right, I included this picture because this is me working with one of our master's students who is actually getting a master's in choral conducting.
Right.
And I love teaching the choral conducting students because I think it's so important that they have that important pedagogical knowledge.
Absolutely. You know, to piggyback on that, as a conductor, if you don't understand the voice, it's not just about the gesture. You know, how are we going to be a better conductor, a better music educator? Well, by understanding and learning from our great studio teachers. To continue that conversation, if I understand as a music educator, as a conductor, understand the pedagogy behind variety of types of singing, then my ensembles are going to be better then as well. And thank you for including our fun little cartoon as well. But if we as a conductor must do the research in order to be able to work with these voices, so that that makes us a better rounded musician. Coming back to the idea that it's the full singer, not just choir. Yeah. Uh-oh. Fine.
So we all want our piece of the pie.
Right.
And this is a student being caught in the middle, but this pie does not just automatically renew itself. So our student only has so much to give us. And so we have to be cognizant of the mental and physical health and its limitations for our students, how much they're really able to give us. I'll talk later in the presentation about this idea of vocal load and doing some self-assessment for our students about how much they're using their voice and in what ways, and how to test at the end of each day to know that they are in good vocal health and good alignment.
Yeah, because if we're not aware of how much singing and speaking that we're doing in a day, then we can also do our students a disservice if we're not teaching them how to use that wisely as a professional, for sure. Can I do it? I can.
Yeah.
And so, which that also then leads us to how that we continue to collaborate. Not only do we need to be aware of the students and their issues, but then also to be. I love bringing Dr. Wunderlich in as a model, or any of my voice colleagues. Takes us back to doing the Aaron Copeland in the beginning, and the students were talking about that actually yesterday, about the loving to see, for our students to see professionals that have honed their skills continue to work. It's a wonderful environment where our students get to see those things. But then also she has come in numerous times to, okay, we're doing this German piece, can you help us with our diction? Because she is, that's her expertise more than it is mine. Just this week that I was asking her about Asian diction and such, because we're doing a piece that has other languages. So we were going and helping each other in that process for sure. But then that also might mean, coming to a voice teacher as well. Okay, well, my students are having this issue, or we need to be able to develop this technique. Do you have a vocalist that can assist us with those as well?
And Jeremy has been so good about coming to our auditions for our prospective students even. I've never known a choir director who has just come in every Saturday that we have auditions and just been there to see who we have coming in the fall, because it's so important for our prospective students to see him, because choir is going to be a huge selling point for many of our prospective students. So I appreciate that he does that. I appreciate that he extends an invitation to all the voice faculty every fall to come into the choir auditions. He's even extended an invitation to our opera director that his chamber choir could sing the choral parts in an opera, or even if it's a bigger choral ensemble in the opera, to actually have a chorale. So that collegiality and mutuality, that's why I came up with that title, Commutuality, mutual endeavors, mutual benefits. And anytime our students see us doing that, it's training them to be better colleagues. No one wants to work with someone who's not a good colleague.
That's right.
It's not fun. And it's fun to work with Jeremy. I love my collaboration with him, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful blessing to my life and in my time at Winthrop. So,
You know, well, thank you, and likewise. But often we see that environments that are not that, and we are choral singer, we're a solo singer, we have voice teachers, we have conductors, and somehow there's this divide, and I don't really understand why that is, and how we can move to, we're teaching the same students, we're teaching them love of music and singing.
and the dangerous part is it becomes this whole kind of technique mystique that Richard Miller talks about in his structure of singing, where that spiritual guru, and it pits students against other students.
Right.
Let me pick a side. I'm on Dr. Mims' side and not on Dr. Wunderlich's side, and that is not productive for anyone,
Right.
especially the student.
And which is the same slide here exactly. Our students are watching us. Our students are learning from us, and we're hoping that they can take. As I tell my conductors all the time, you're putting things in your hip pocket to use for later. We're taking and we're working together to develop those things. This is from after we did in the beginning in McBride Hall. And again, just to reiterate, her professionalism as she was modeling the singing was so beneficial then for our students then as well. And that was a hard piece.
It was a very hard piece, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Copeland in the beginning, but it has a very large mezzo-soprano solo, and it's about 15 minutes long.
It's long.
And had to pick these pitches out from nowhere, and I don't have perfect pitch. I made errors in the rehearsal, and it's good for my students to see that I have to practice. I just can't roll out of bed and do these things. But it also showed, I think, a certain flexibility, and because I would say that was a simpler vibrato that I used and portions of that piece. So the flexibility of my voice, and as I said before, I went to a choral college. I've always loved choir music, and because of the collaboration here, and even training my church choir, because I'm not him by any means, but I do okay for my choir at my church. I continue to love choral music, and so it's allowing me to stay in that venue and stay in that genre, which I've always loved. So, and the next slide too shows me with a couple of my students, and this is right before our Carnegie Hall performance, and I went with, we had a conglomeration of people. We had York County Choral Society members, we had some community members, we had some Winthrop students,
About 50,
about 50 people, and then we did a concert in 2019 at Carnegie, and here I am right before our concert.
Yeah, and so she sang, she got up there and sang with the students in the choir, and it was so wonderful. And I know you can also speak to this later, but you sang alto, exactly, and even as a big soprano, that's where she was singing, and we did the Brahms Nenny. It was so much fun to have those students to be able to hear the color that was coming out of your voice, and all the altos were like begging me, we wanted Dr. Wunderlich to stand right behind us, please, we want to hear her. So they were, as we had 120 people up there, they're like, oh my gosh, there she is. And so it was really fun for them to see you involved in the choir, and it was fun for me too.
And I think we began the presentation with the responsibility of the choir director and what he needs to be in tune with. But as a vocal instructor, I need to also have shared responsibility. And part of that is having regular conversations with my students. Oftentimes I use the first 5 minutes of a lesson to talk to a student and just chat. But a lot of the time that I do that is devoted to how are things going in choir? How are you feeling? Are there challenges? Can I help you with something? And we were sharing yesterday afternoon, and I told him the story. I did not go to North Texas on a voice scholarship. I went on a choral scholarship. And I was put into a 16 voice chamber ensemble of graduate students and thrown into being one of 4 altos reading very fiendishly difficult, hard music, but also doing a lot of early music too. And my teacher, Miss Miller, worked with me in creating a flexible technique. She taught me how to straighten or simplify my vibrato. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And I would not have been able to do that healthily had Miss Miller not helped me. And so I need to do that for my students too if they are struggling with something vocally.
I love how you say that you can learn in the voice studio how to make those kinds of sounds, even though that we're doing it in the group setting, speaking to it individually. Helps the student, helps them understand how they need to change or alter some of their technique, and so it adds to their skill set.
Yeah.
Versatility for sure. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. So,
some of these things we've already talked about.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Conversations, we've talked about that, including the voice faculty as special soloist. Voice faculty is being included in choir auditions. Jeremy's going to talk about that in the next slide. Offering of chamber choir, being the opera chorus for productions. Invitation for faculty to come into the choral rehearsal setting like I do for Diction Help, or Craig Allen has come up and done SOVTs with the choir. Tour opportunities. I know Mr. Allen's gone on tour with the choir, and I think you'd like to include some new faculty possibly in the future. Choir director and prospective student auditions and juries. I forgot to say he sits through juries. He's so good. And then the inclusion of cross curriculum, and possibly if you have questions about this course later, we could even ask Josh Wald because he's in our meeting this afternoon. I created an online vocal pedagogy for the choral director course in summer 2020. That was a 2-week, very intensive course. And through that, I offered for Jeremy to be included in the course, and he just would kind of see what we were doing day to day and check in. But we've had conversations about liking to see this included in the master's choral conducting track. I've worked hard since I've come here to Winthrop in adding courses to our choral conducting music education degrees that I feel are integral. When I first came, pedagogy was required for performance majors, not music ed. That makes no sense. Yeah. So that's now included in the track for our choral conducting undergrads. And also diction was one semester for our choral conducting music eds. It's now 2, so they have to take the same amount as our performance majors. And I think that is just so important. Possibly, I even thought about this morning. We had talked about doing this as a continuing ed, especially online. It would be so easy to offer that as a continuing ed course. But also possibly doing some team teaching together in this course.
I can't imagine a music ed degree without 2 semesters of
two
diction. Without pedagogy,
yeah.
Because that's what you're doing in the classroom. So thank you for those changes that strengthen our music educators, our conductors for sure. And I'll piggyback on the tour. As we take chorale and chamber singers on tour, we're singing a lot. We're doing a lot of concerts and such. And I really appreciated having Craig on the trip with me so that he was able to also monitor the vocal health, do some warm-ups with us, do some cool downs. We all had our straws that they would pull out, and he would literally lead the cool downs at the end of those, because it's a lot of singing. So I really appreciated having, as I was focused on logistics and the music making, to have another colleague that was there. Okay, I'm going to worry about the students' health during this process. So that's I loved that as well, and I look forward to having more voice faculty there. Speaking of, then auditioned. Yes, I do choral auditions every fall, and it's a lot of singers. And speaking of sitting through, Kristen has sat through a lot of choral auditions in my office or in the choir room, and it's been great to have her there. Craig's been there. I've offered for other voice faculty to be in there as well, and so it's been great to see, to get the input. Hey, what did you hear with this singer? What voice part do you think that they might be needing to sing? Is it good for them to do this or that? As well as, it's wonderful just to meet the variety of these singers, and for her to sit in and say, oh, interesting, you're a non-major, maybe you should think about studying voice sometime. Or so it's a variety of conversations that have enabled and come out of those auditions. I have students sing a short little clip of an art song or musical theater piece. I take them through some vocalizing, some wonderful sight singing we always enjoy, and then do some pitch matching. And then whatever voice faculty is in there, they're taking notes and recommending, hi, maybe this person should be in collegiate choir or chorale, they should sing soprano or alto, etc. So I love those notes, and I can go back and it helps me in so many ways. So I appreciate involving the voice faculty in those environments.
Okay, so again, I just have these quotations I just thought were great in here. And a choral group cannot actually be referred to as such unless it projects an integrated effect. Until that occurs, the group is merely a collection of individual voices unified only through physical and mechanistic means. And so this whole idea of teaching the individual voice in the corporate setting. So we're focused on being a singular sound and a singular group, not a plural character. But how do we do that with, just melding this beautiful homogeneous color out of all these different colors? And it can be done. And again, as I said, I'm just a choir director in a church, but I did have a woman who had studied voice at Winthrop 30 some years ago come to a rehearsal right before COVID for the first time in my choir. And she said to someone after the rehearsal, I feel like I've just had a voice lesson. Well, that's wonderful. That was wonderful for me to hear. And those are the things that we need to be addressing in the corporate setting. Because as we've mentioned just in our informal conversations here, so many of our students are not taking private voice lessons. So
Right.
how can we help them be in tune with their instruments? So we're going to be looking at 3 criteria: pitch and color and dynamics.
And most of the members of my chorale do study voice, because most of them are voice majors or musical theater. But then in my collegiate choir, only a handful are actually studying voice, and so I spend more time developing the instrument, spend more time not just learning music, but literally teaching voice in that setting. It's enabling them to be a singer for forever. That's the hope. To grow them. I'm a violinist as well, and I can go pull my instrument out of the case. Singers, we have to develop that instrument, and that has to happen then in the choral setting then as well.
And that's a shot of the choir at Carnegie Hall. That's Dr. Mims on the podium there. So
Good
memories,
times,
good memories, yes.
Someday, right.
Yes. So one beautiful thing that's come out of our conversation is that we need to be building a shared vocal vocabulary. And again, another beautiful thing is we've realized what we've done as colleagues and tried to help our students with, but we've realized where we need to keep going and where we need to be pushing the envelope. And so what I came up with is that singers should be hearing the same vocabulary in the choral rehearsal as they are in the voice studio. Now, my voice students, I believe, know most of these terms, and they should be hearing these same things in the choral setting. And this is only the beginning of the list. So words like chiaroscuro and appoggio and portamento and martellato, which is vocal articulation. We know what staccato and legato are. Do we know what martellato is? Do we know what a passaggio is? Do we know where it is in my voice? Do we know what onset means, the beginning of tone? Do we know that our onset could be hyper or hypofunctional? That's the land of James McKinney. He's the one who came up with these terms, hyper and hypofunction and balanced onset, and et cetera, and et cetera.
You know, it's the idea is, as you were mentioning, are singers just mimicking, or are they applying knowledge then for the future as well? So if they are learning all of the terms in their studio and then they're getting it again, then in the choral rehearsal room, then it's going to stick in their own instrument. Yeah.
So the next slide is actually a picture of Luther College in the past couple years. This is their Christmas at Luther. And there are more choirs behind what you see on the camera. They'd be in the back of the auditorium, the Center for Faith and Life. And so I felt, as a big voice with a bigger vibrato, I was told that I couldn't, be in the top choir because my voice just didn't lend itself to blending with other singers. And what I think we agree with is that there is a place for each person in choir. We just have to be cognizant of how to help them find the place for themselves, whether that's done through seating arrangements in the choral setting, or whether that's done with helping our stronger voices know how to control and simplify their vibrato. But that was just a snippet of where I came from. I wanted to show you where I came from. I come from this Midwest choral dominant collegiate setting, and I'm thankful for it.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of history I talk about in my choral methods class of the schools like Luther that sometimes students have been asked, I'm not saying at Luther, but it's often in choirs, you need to sound like this person, as opposed to figuring out how to blend, how to be your own voice, how to be your own instrument in that setting. I'll mention this later, but that's conforming to someone else as opposed to addressing uniformity, and I'll come back to that in a second then as well. But I loved how you were saying so often that we as a singer, then we find those community aspects that we can't do outside the choral setting. You can be that singer only like that in the choral setting.
Yeah, and if we teach our students how to find the joys and the juggling of, okay, I'm running off to chorale rehearsal, and then after that I have my voice lesson, and I'm learning how to use my voice with one healthy technique in a new way, we can teach them a lifelong love. I mean, I use the analogy of playing football. You're not going to be playing football when you're 75 years old, probably. But my grandfather sang in his church choir until shortly before his death. That's a lifelong love. And that's something I see at my church too. Our octogenarians even is singing beautifully on a Sunday morning. If we can teach our students to do that, it is not only a community building, but it's a lifelong love.
And you mentioned here flexibility. We're teaching our students in the studio to be flexible singers and address a variety of different types of repertoire. Then it's the same kind of idea. We're doing different kinds of repertoire in the choral setting with often some of the same techniques that we can use. And I'll speak about some specific composers here in a little while.
The quotation at the top, Jerry Helton was the voice teacher at Winthrop for 40 some years. And one thing I always really agreed with him was we are training our students to be their own voice teacher. And so, again, this self-awareness in the choral setting, taking an ownership of what's happening with their voice, monitoring what's happening with their voice. Okay, how does my body feel? You know, am I holding tension in my right arm? What's strange about that onset? What do I need to fix? I'm having problems with my E vowel. Why is that? So we're constantly asking and answering these questions. And we will talk about it later, but in the warm-up rehearsal, in the choir rehearsal, really having a reason for why we're doing the exercises that we're doing and the voice building exercises we're doing. Something I stress in vocal pedagogy is that no vocalese is sacred. We don't just do things because it's what our teacher taught us to do. It's addressing a certain element that we need to be cognizant of. And so I think that's what this slide is all about, is that we're teaching our students self-sufficiency skills. I just taught a lesson this morning to one of my former students, and I was talking to her about this, and she said, you always stressed that we would know why we're doing the exercise we're doing. And I love that. That's like affirmation to me that she was listening.
Right.
So the importance of the individual, even though we're serving the community, is so imperative. He's contributing to a picture that's larger than himself. Then the conductor has to instill in a choral singer that it's marvelous to relinquish his individuality and to be uniform but not conforming, and has to make him love it. If you're totally changing everything about me in a choral setting, I don't even know who I am anymore. And so I lose that love of myself and my voice.
Especially in rehearsing in the distances in which we are currently, I'm always saying personal accountability at the moment. It's always important, but it's even more incumbent currently because literally they may only hear one other singer, and then the next person can hear the next person, the next person. So it's monitoring and how does this feel to me, and how am I applying in that larger context. It's becoming even more heightened with the our current situation, but that means it's also the director's responsibility to understand the music in which that you pick, understand the vocal issues that piece may have. Is this piece going to serve your students well? Can your students accomplish this style well? Are they ready for the range? Are they ready for any kind of any issues that this piece may have? It's incumbent upon me to do my research on that, so I understand the sounds that are going to happen and how to lead a singer to make those sounds. But if I don't know it in my head beforehand and done that research, then that's going to only hamper the students' learning for sure.
So this is where we get into how we help our students be flexible. So we're going to be looking at pitch, which has to do with vibrato, color, which has to do with diction, and dynamics, and we're going to address seating arrangements there, and then Dr. Mims is going to talk about 3 composers who are very different with different ideas of vocalization and how he addresses that in the choral situation. So the first question in this vibrato pitch is, does straight tone even exist? Historical vocal performance practice tells us, we have to sing with a straightened tone when we're doing early music. There's a reason for that, even though we don't have recordings, that would be very helpful. But one is period instruments are lighter sound-wise, so the voice would have to blend into that. But also, I hadn't even thought of this, that in the camera, the small chamber ensemble, that's much different than the cappella, which would be done in the cathedrals, and that those acoustics are so wet and we have wet spaces on campus
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And we have to adjust our voices, because if we don't adjust our voices, we're just going to have a hot mess with our sound. So I hadn't even thought about the capella,
Space.
the space.
Yeah.
So excessive vibrato, I think, is the foe. And normal vibrato rate, which is connected to our body tremor rate. I read something from, I can't remember who it was right now, but they said that vibrato rate is connected to our tremor rate, much like if you've ever held an electric fence. And that's what a muscle is doing, is it's sending those electric currents, and that's what our vocal folds are doing. They're innervated. So obviously we would have some vibrato in our sound. But excessive tremolo, too fast, anything that throws us out of the 5 to 7 oscillations per second is going to be noticeable. So we have the fast vibrato and then the wobble, which is the slow vibrato. And really those are our foes. Dr. Anton Armstrong from St. Olaf talks about blending versus bland, that we don't want to take all the color out, because then we just have this very boring, I call it vanilla toast, white sound. And maybe we need to do more terminology versus just saying straight tone, because straight tone implies probably pressing or holding back. So unison vowels, unison color, you use simple vibrato or matched vibrato.
Limit. It's the same kind of idea. If I'm going to say posture as opposed to alignment, one is going to imply more tension. Straight tone often will imply a tension in the sound. My mentor said he would never say the ST word. He would approach it as we're going to limit. We're going to use bigger ears. There's a variety of ways that you can say it that was going to be a better approach. Yeah.
So McCoy and all these things would be taught in a voice lesson, hopefully balanced. And that has to do with what I call the valve. Many of us call it the valve, the vocal fold resistance against subglottic breath flow, easy breath support, laryngeal freedom. That would have to do with the height of the larynx and making sure that the larynx is stabilized. Muscular release and the articulators, especially the tongue and the jaw. The more I teach, and I've said this many times to my singers, I know that the sound is created with our vocal folds, but the more I teach, the more I realize it's got to start in the front to make everything work well moving backwards. And the willingness to make a different sound quality. And so that's from Scott McCoy's book.
How is it? We've been talking about, so can we teach a student to limit? Can we be successful? And then I think we can. We can do it in a group setting, but also I love the fact that she's saying, hey, we should address this in the vocal studio also, because the students may not be aware that they're bringing extra tension. They're harming the voice. Well, we can teach them how to use the voice in a different manner. One of my friends, she often says, okay, well, we sing with full vibrato, and then we might just back off that a little bit. And you describe that as also it's the pressure, and that's what you want to add with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I just put these quotations or these ideas about vibrato at the top here from Carl Seashore, who's doing all kinds of research on vibrato in the 50s at the University of Iowa. So pitch vibrato, intensity vibrato, and timbral vibrato. And this is all beautifully put into a wonderful dissertation by a woman named Danya Katok. And you can actually find this on the internet. You can find the whole dissertation, and it's all about straight tone singing and how she is a professional singer who does a lot of straight tone singing and how she does it healthily. And we've included a works cited sheet for you with all the wonderful articles and books we've used as we've collected our data. And so that website is there for you. But she talks about two things in order to simplify. I'm just going to steal your
Great.
simple. Flow phonation, which means low subglottic pressure, which would mean that the vocal folds are not as pressed together Because if we adduct, I call it heavy adduction and light adduction, that's just my terminology. If there's heavy adduction, we build up a lot of subglottic pressure, and that's going to be a bigger sound. So if we keep that pressure a little bit lighter, but not breathy, I think that's the thing. And that's the whole, and Anton even says breathing, is not balanced at all. He doesn't like breathy phonation to try to make the blend. And low airflow. So we're having low subglottic pressure and low airflow to keep the dynamic possibly a little bit more subdued. The other thing she talks about is creating a darker timbre, which this is why we've got to establish our vocabulary, chiaroscuro. So how do we create the oscuro in our sound? We do that by lifting the soft palate and lowering the larynx and finding the hoot. This is why falsetto exercises or high exercises for our women are really great, and finding that hoot in the sound, that tallness in the sound. But be careful of monitoring the pressure at the valve level. But often our singers, I was just helping a high school student this morning, she was trying to darken the timbre, she pulls her tongue back and creates this, what I call fake chocolate sound, or fake mezzo, fake bass sound, and everything is out of alignment again.
Yeah, so I love how you were already modeling that, even as you were showing in that, okay, we're going to continue that space up, we're going to continue and keep the placement here, as opposed to letting it help, because often then in a group setting, singers aren't aware that they're doing and bringing all that sound right back. So thank you for discussing how we can teach that.
I want to just piggyback, and we were saying this is just how we operate. So this is more of a conversation just in front of all y'all. But Rollo Dilworth, who works at Temple University and is so wonderful. I watched him on a YouTube video. You can find it yourself. But talking about the modeling with the E, A, A, O, U exercise that he does these hand signs to show where the mouth should be. So like the E is this way to keep the tongue forward. And then he does A to bring the sound forward. And then he does Ah to do exactly what I just did with the hoot space. And then O, and then he does this with his finger with the oo. And all those little things you can throw into a choral rehearsal can help your student visualize, okay, what is my anatomy doing? Right.
Because then the more they can do that on their own, is what they comes back to that personal accountability. You're in charge of your instrument, Which is I love this today when you were describing this.
Oh yeah, so this is actually an exercise I just took from this wonderful dissertation, and I hope you'll read it. She says, one of my favorite strategies for achieving low airflow is the image of fogging up a window. And so she wants you to put your palm to your mouth and exhale like you're going to fog up a window, but to not make the exhalation silent, because we don't want to overblow the vocal folds with too much breath. Because that's pressed, our vocal folds are really straight in that. And then we don't want to underfeed. So if you just do this and make that exhalation silent, you can hear yourself exhaling, and just monitor that it's not too fast. And then she just goes straight into a vowel. So, and all of a sudden my voice is a little bit simpler vibrato, which would match my people around me, especially in earlier music.
And yes. And it's on both ends of the spectrum, early music, and then as well as some of the contemporary literature that's actually a similar sound. So would you say, so as a conversation, I know often early music singers as well, I know when I'm doing that, I have to take more breaths.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's to continue that kind of sound.
Easier phonation.
Totally, yes, exactly. And then, as well as your inhalation sets it up. We discussed this earlier, of it's the idea of taking a breath, and I have all of that, as opposed to allowing the breath to enter your body, and then how you monitor that as well. Yeah.
The next is an exercise taken from Richard Miller and written in his Structure of Singing, but this is a Farnelli exercise, which is basically teaching how to do a poggio, which means to lean, which most of us know what that is. But to just step through this whole idea of Farinelli, the wonderful counter, or castrati, and to inhaling mentally, counting 1 to 5, full expansion of the ribs without overcrowding, suspending the breath, holding the glottis, but not rigid, and then just try to begin our tone. It's a way of helping the valve not overblow or underblow, but to keep our breath very constant and very stable, which will help our vibrato rate even out.
Absolutely.
So, diction, I'm going to take this just because I'm the diction teacher.
Totally.
And I love teaching diction. I love this quotation by Julia Davids about singers understanding pronunciation, but they don't understand the articulation. And I will tell you, when I was taught, and this is not to throw my teachers under the bus, but when I was taught as an undergrad, it was a lot of make this sound. You want to do the mixed, Y sound in French or German? Okay, make this sound. And it wasn't teaching me what to do with my tongue. It wasn't teaching me what to do with my mouth. It was just rote. It was this relationship, conversation back and forth. What she's saying in this quotation is we need to help our students understand what is going on articulatory wise. So I'm a big advocate in my diction class that students know terms like fricatives and what a voice consonant is and what the prepalatal sound is and where the alveolar ridge is. And it was funny, one of my students this semester said, you want us to be this specific for the test? And I said, you'd want to be that specific with your student when you're teaching them, wouldn't you? And she said, fair enough. So articulation, anatomy, knowledge versus just rote. And this is a quotation I say every semester in my diction course: good diction equals good singing. And I had a student challenge me, well, good diction, you can't maintain good diction if you're singing high. And obviously, no, you can't hold a pure vowel if you're singing a high B flat. But if you know where the good diction is in the speech level of your voice, you should know how to change it going up and down through your passaggi. So surface level versus deep learning. And what I mean in the next little thing is generational, sorry, I can't say that, learning. So if I teach it to my student, he's going to be able to teach it to his student, and it's this wonderful, piggyback.
Right.
So, and it's also, as we said, opportunities for collaborating in your department. He's struggling with the Asian diction. Well, we have a wonderful Japanese colleague. I said,
I spoke to her yesterday.
Good.
Yeah.
I don't know much about Asian diction, so I sent him to Dr. Deguchi. So, an opportunity for collaboration. So in the next slide, I have just a picture of an iceberg. And we know this whole idea that the iceberg is bigger below than above. And this is a great representation of deep learning. So if we're just doing rote and saying, make this sound, make a nasal ah, just do this, ah. Okay, well, number one, that's not right. It's just imitation versus understanding.
Right.
And I've already talked about this, teaching vocabulary, and good diction equals good singing, understanding modification. And as we said, we're evolving as professors, and one thing we've already talked about is I'm going to come in and give an anatomy lesson next fall to his choirs, and I'm going to teach them what's in their mouth, what moves around to make the different vowel shapes. You even said something about charts yesterday.
Totally, I know. I'd love to have those kind of things in the choir room. Assuming we'll be back in the choir room. How that should still be just like in the vocal studio, right? Totally.
Yeah.
And I love the fact of, often people will say, hey, if we take a picture, then everyone's mouth should look the same in the choir. But then we're talking about, well, does that mean they're all singing the same pitch? Because, literally, we know that people are going to have different issues at different parts of their voice. And so in a choir, we might be achieving good diction, we might be achieving the correct vowel, but it's going to look different for other people, right?
So I just put up this caricature because I think it's so silly. Everyone's mouth looks the same. Well, we would assume in a choral setting that the basses are singing one pitch, the altos are singing another, sopranos and tenors. everyone's mouth should really be in a different position,
Right.
because they could be singing a different vowel, they could be singing, as I said, a different pitch. So it's the whole conformity versus uniformity.
Right. Yes, because if we're going to say that comes back to conforming to the same, or we're all going to sound like this person, we're all going to make this same sound, or we're going to make the same vowel. Well, uniformity, we're going to have a uniform sound, we're going to approach the vowel similarly, but it's going to look different. Uniformity of color, but it's not going to look the same.
Yeah. It's going to be a better sound, actually.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, because if my sopranos are way high and they're making doing the same vowel, it's going to be if doing the same vowel as the altos and different range, we're probably not going to like the sound.
Right.
So, and I loved how you're discussing blend versus bland and taking all of the color. It's devoid of any individual. This might be later, but I'll go here now to Robert Shaw developed choirs of solo singers, and so he allowed them to be. He thought that the choirs were better served in the fact that we have trained voices in there, smart singers who are wanting to do that, who can accomplish things like I like a simple vibrato or a balanced tone. Again, how we approach that. But it's not bland. Yeah, so even though that we are blending. And this comes to then finding a place for you in the choral ensemble. So Weston Noble and Anson Armstrong both do seating of choral ensembles, and I do that with my choirs in a typical situation, which is not currently because we're 12 feet apart and everything else. But we can serve our singers well by finding where their voice can be contributing. That might be literally, okay, maybe you need to sing this voice part in choir, so it's already the seating of in the right section. But within the section, I spend a lot of time finding the place where singers can fully sing their voice, where they can tune with the people around them. Again, not sounding like one singer, but finding a way that they can be a section. So Weston Noble did this, and I do this with my choirs. We sing My Country 'Tis of Thee, and I move singers around until they're with similar type of timbre, similar type of color. And I tell singers, it's not better or worse. So we think about an orchestra, someone who's sitting at the front, the concertmaster, they're seated first chair. That is not like that in the choral setting. It's not better or worse. I'm standing in the front. I'm standing in the back. No, yes, you are, but it's because this is the color of your voice where you can contribute in the choral ensemble. So literally, often if I have like I had Dr. Wunderlich in the large choir, hey, I'm going to put her up top and allow her. She's able to sing over the top of the sound. She's able to fully contribute. I have a lighter voice, a lyric voice often. Maybe I'm going to put on the edge at the front, and then I find the right mix thereof. And so that way a singer is not feeling like they're naked. Oh my gosh, I'm in the front row and I can't fully sing. Or a singer that is way in the back that is feeling they have large voices around them, and then they feel like that they can't. They can't hear. They have to compete. I will tell you a story about I had a student just this past week that thought that I was hiding her voice because I put her in the back, when literally it was about she is a strong voice, and so she is a leader in so many ways. So finding the right place so that so singers can fully contribute and they're not feeling odd in a choral setting, and it also really helps with vocal fatigue, because if singers are in the wrong places and they're either having to hold back or they're having to push, if you will, in that setting, then we're not doing our singers a service at all.
Yeah, and I think that's what this last quotation is about, is not suppressing our bigger voices,
right,
but encouraging the weak. So we're not making the ensemble weaker by pushing me down. And Richard Miller goes on to say the threat to vocal health in the choral singing is not in decibel competition, but in attempting to submerge the voice into the surrounding bland sound. And that's where we get a lot of this whole pressurization or trying to suppress my sound, which is often done unhealthily, which is the vocal health issue.
Right. And then that's where people get afraid, and they're thinking, well, I'm not a choral singer then.
And then they don't enjoy it.
They don't enjoy it, and they're told, there's not a place for you.
Yeah.
And so, just like in the vocal studio, when you're doing a variety of different kinds of rep, the same thing happens in the choral setting where we have to, I hope to, adjust the sound in some ways for the literature choice. And so, just to give a few examples here, so we're doing Brahms' Nenny, we were doing, that is a sound that will be akin to doing a German art song. That's the kind of sound that you want. So if the students are aware that that's, okay, that I can sing in this manner, I can sing with this type of style for this composer, so it sounds like Brahms. Okay, right? We would not want to approach Brahms in the same manner as we were doing early music last semester in Palestrina. It would sound weird. Can you imagine as well a lot of what the voice has to do in Brahms and that other kind of sound would just sound strange and would feel strange. Whereas we did a lot of early music last semester, teaching students, okay, that's going to be a different sound in doing something like Palestrina. We're going to limit that more even tone, however you want to approach that, and teach students that there is a different sound, it's the same voice. But we also did a pop song last year. We did an arrangement of True Colors. So that's more of the musical theater type or pop style, and it's good for students to be able to adjust, to learn that we have one voice, but we can use it in a variety of manners, just like we are in the vocal studio. So we might have more of that speech-like resonance in a choral setting. Hey, that's okay too, depending on if that's what the composer, if that's what the composition is requiring. And then lastly, something like an Eric Whitaker or a Jake Renaissance, and all of a sudden that things are crunchy, if you will, and everything is right on top of each other. So that's going to be more akin to your early music sound. Again, not approaching it in a tense, straight tone, but bigger ears, a little more even, so we can hear those chords, which means also turning the volume down and being okay with the fact that choosing a performance space that they can hear each other, and then allowing the sound to be lighter and softer. I think that's all what's incumbent upon us as conductors to be aware of the kind of sound and the technique that has to happen. Do you have
So in one of our conversations this past week, because Dr. Mims is a violist, we talked about just the audition process in an orchestra, that an orchestra wants a strong solo player.
Right.
So why are we not thinking the same in a choir setting? So there's benefits of a choir full of strong individual voices. And Ray Geer says we need to rise above this distinguished mediocrity, which means a choir made up of voices where none are solo voices. And so our choirs will be stronger if our individuals are stronger.
Right. And it's smart singers. It's, you were developing the voice and then teaching them how to apply that in a choir setting. That's incumbent upon us who work with these singers.
So the next is just helping our students with their vocal health, which I think is so important as we're sharing this pie that's not just going to self-renew. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is vocal load. And can you advance it? So this is good. So this term came from Ingo Tietze, who we know, University of Iowa voice scientist. And the definition he came up with was the vocal intensity over total measured time. And there are two types, which are laryngeal muscle, that should not say music, I'm sorry, muscle fatigue, which is the amount and time we're using our voice, and the vocal fold posturing. And that in a regular hour, we can have the opening and closing of our vocal folds 1,800 times. That's not even singing. That's just like what I'm doing right now. And the second is this laryngeal tissue fatigue. So if I am suppressing my sound and doing pressed phonation, every time my vocal folds come together, they're making a very unhealthy collision. So this is anything that's hyperfunctional or hypofunctional,
Right.
as James McKinney would call it. So monitoring these two things. And the next slide is about a book called The Evolving Singing Voice, which was written by our NATS president, our NATS national president, Karen Brunson. If you are interested in reading more about the college singer, which I think we're addressing today is mainly our college singers, look at the young adult chapter. And what I love about this book is she talks about the changes and challenges for each age of singers. And I've included a link to a wonderful interview with her. And actually, I was talking about my choral pedagogy course this summer. That was one of Josh's assignments, was to watch this interview, and I had some questions for him about the different ages of the voice and things we need to monitor as choral conductors. But one thing she talks about is her colleague, Teresa Brancaccio. Can you advance it to the next slide? And I've included a link to this vocal use points tracker. And Teresa is a colleague of hers at Northwestern. And if you click on this link, it will take you to this chart, which is called the Vocal Use Points Tracker. And you start with an arbitrary number, 100 works great. And basically, it's asking your student to do some self-assessments. We cracked up because we equated it with counting points for Weight Watchers. So you have 100 points in a day. And how are you using those points? So if I have opera rehearsal for an hour and a half, I'm using 25 of my points, all I have is 100. So how do I need to monitor when I'm just eating dinner with my friends in a noisy restaurant? And how many points am I spending there, knowing I have to go to choir rehearsal in a couple of hours? So it's a great way to just track what you're doing, how you feel after every activity. There are some questions within the tracker, and to make some adjustments. She says if you're feeling fatigued or sick, or even if you have PMS, that affects your voice. That affects the mucosal lining. So you should probably subtract 50 points from that 100. And if you're feeling very ill, then you need to subtract more points. So again, it's just, teaching our students to be their own voice teacher. Again, that self-monitoring that we want them to be doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to check that
And
out.
then another thing that Brunson includes is this Bastion vocal swelling test that you would, at the beginning and end of each day, this helps to detect if you have some mucosal injury at the vocal fold level. Happy birthday on just 13531, just a triad in the upper portion of your voice, and monitor your onsets. Are they breathy? Are they hard and pressed? Or does it feel balanced to you? Do you feel fatigue at the beginning or end of every day? But I would highly encourage you to get that book. It's such a great resource. The Evolving Singer Voice.
I love how you're saying that we teach the students then when they're involved in all of these different things that they're in charge of protecting themselves and in charge of how they're using their instrument.
Exactly.
And that might just be speaking.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
And so, coming to circle back about the choral warm-up, making sure that we as a conductor plan our warm-ups that are going to help us in the rehearsal, but also going to build the voice. Because how I approach the choral warm-up for one of my choirs is different than the other one. Because the collegiate choir is made up more of people who don't take voice, So I spend more time developing the instrument, spend more time and making sure that I choose different warm-ups that are going to address the vocal challenges of the repertoire that we are about to do. And so, okay, so we're going, and this is with my upper level choir as well, chorale, if we're going to do, doing Bach last year, we're going to do some flexibility exercises that are going to engage that part of the voice. No, we're going to do more legato. If we're going to be doing something ooey gooey, we're going to spend some time in the vocal warm up. I love, and I put this in the works cited as well, choral concepts by Donald Nguyen out of UCLA. UCLA. He did a wonderful his chapter in his book. He gives a vocalese for each different aspect where he is saying, okay, choose something that's going to mental and vocal unity. So we're going to do just one vowel, and what is that going to feel like? But it's also, we're going to do something that's going to move the voice into different ranges. We're going to do something that is going to address the flexibility. And then on the back end, finally, then how do we address blend? So if we skip all over there without warming up and without allowing the voice and allowing the individual to sing, and we skip right to this, then we've done our singers a disservice, I think. But I like that chapter a lot. That's the one that I use a lot with my choral methods class. And other things that I worry that I do in my choral warm up, and I don't know about you, I start mid range and go down. And then I don't take my singers up until later, and then eventually when we get up into that other avenue. I think approaching the choral warm up differently with every group. I do it different with my church choir and even on Zoom currently, because that's a different kind of voice as well, and a voice in a different era. And so all of those things, I think we have to make sure that we plan those wisely as a conductor. And yes, it's okay to move around, and it's okay to teach the all of the things we want singers to do. It happens at that warm up, and not letting the warm up be background music to taking role or getting your there is a reason why. And I love how you said your singers know I'm doing this exercise because. And that makes you a better professional. Okay, I need to be able to facilitate, so I'm going to pull that vocalese out.
So if you're interested, and these are included in the works cited page to Sadiloff's Choral Pedagogy, which is the text that I used with the course that I taught this summer, Brenda Smith and Robert Sadiloff, and also the Shirley Emmons Prescriptions for Choral Excellence. These are what they both agree are important elements in a well-rounded choral warm-up. That we would do posture exercises and appoggio and onset and vocal articulation, legato, martellato, staccato, messa di voce, which would be a great valve worker to make sure you're monitoring that flow phonation, extending the range, and as you just said, make wise decisions there. Middle voice to low and high at the end. It's the same reason I do belt warm-ups at the end of my warm-ups.
Sure.
Because I call that heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Agility exercises, and especially if you're doing something that is fast-moving in the choral rehearsal, that's important. Diction and intonation and ensemble. And and then one thing that they both advocate for, Sadiloff and Emmons, is this whole idea of cool down. Now, I do not do cool downs in my voice lessons. I'm guilty of it. I probably need to be doing that, and we had a little informal conversation about cool downs, and I think that was something that Mr. Allen brought in.
And he did on our tour, which was fascinating. After every concert, then he would lead us in the cool down, and then we teach our singers that as well. If we do it in the rehearsal setting, or as they're leaving, they can also making sure that we. Yeah.
And it's not a long
It's
period.
not long.
It's like a minute.
Right, yeah.
But something to get them back to speech level instead of singing level.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And the brain matters. I should have included this quotation because it sits on my piano, but there's a quotation by James McKinney that says the most beautiful sounds are made in the minds of singers.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole psycho-physical connection, Claudia Friedlander, and I included her book about vocal fitness. It's a new current book. She talks about the voice never lies. Everything you are thinking and feeling will come through in your singing. So what is our intention? Our brain tells our vocal folds what to do. They've done studies where someone has played a major scale and monitored how people's vocal folds actually stretch listening to that major scale.
Wow.
And that would be possibly a very important element in simplifying the vibrato too. This whole idea of pre-phonatory tuning. How can my brain help my flow phonation and my vocal fold closure? So we need to address our singers' brains too. But also too, this whole idea, and Claudia Friedlander talks about it in this chapter, possibly things like meditation in a choral setting. I don't know if you've ever done that before, or focusing before you sing.
Sure. Yeah. To come back to things that we hope to continue, right now in my choral setting, we're doing shorter rehearsals because of getting out of the space, and so we do 30 minutes in, 15 minutes outside, 30 minutes back. And I'm finding that the singers need or are doing better because we're doing shorter stints and then doing brain work. And the brain work sometimes is a sectional. It could also be, I love how you're saying, okay, we can also reflect. We could also do our brain work of diction or reflecting on the words and the text and how we're going to get that and to our audience, and then we make them for a better performer if we're addressing all of that and not just singing full out, developing the brain as well. I love that.
And the warm-ups can really be where you teach the individual in the corporate setting too. So it's another vocabulary teaching moment. What every singer needs to know about the body. That's a book that I use and supplement in my vocal pedagogy class. Many of us know about that. Body mapping exercises, the whole idea of 6 points of balance. So finding what is hypofunctional or hyperfunctional in your posturing, and then finding what feels just right. So if Dr. Mims stands in front of me and the choir and says stand up straight, and I have scoliosis and my right leg is longer than my left, what is straight standing for me? It's different than the person next to me. So I call it the Goldilocks position with my students, finding what's just right in our body positioning.
And then as a conductor, then I'm working with the conductors. Every body is going to be different as well. We're saying that we should resemble, as a conductor, good singer's stance is a good way to approach the podium, if you will. But that might look different for Dr. Wunderlich when she conducts the choir as opposed to me. We're a different body, but we can still model that for our singer. And we can also be causing tension in our rehearsal if we are not modeling, if we are doing anything else, then they're going to mimic our stance.
And to be aware too of where we hold tension in the choral setting. One of my sources talks about shoulder folder or folder shoulder.
Oh, totally. Yes.
Have you heard that term before?
Totally.
Folder shoulder.
Yeah, and so I've been more and more with especially with my smaller ensembles, we use a music stand instead because if we go in the vocal studio, you're not holding music, but if we're holding the music the entire time, you're right, you have that realm of tension. So we pull out the stands for most of my ensembles now, and they can sing in that environment. So even in chorale, we have 40 stands, so we pull out, and so I love it.
So the last slide here, this is the end of our presentation, but this is just a chart about, possibly adding that to our choral. Gosh, you're going to have full walls.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah. AO joint, shoulders, thorax, spine, hips, knees, and feet. And the Maldi book carries you through how to find balance in each of those 6 points. Another exercise I love, and this would be a great bonding experience for students too, is that you get four students and they stand kind of right next to each other in a line, and one is the abdominal muscles, and one, and so one is the vocal folds, and so they mime and make the opening where we breathe and then the closing, so you understand all the different levels of your body and what's involved in inhalation and exhalation and singing.
That's
So
great.
that's all we have.
That's
I
a
guess.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know we've been talking a long time, so we enjoy talking about these kind of
Yes.
things and nerding out. You know, like we're in that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop the share here. I'd love to, if you guys have, any questions that have been put in the chat, or you want to open any of that's fine too.
I haven't seen any questions in the chat, so y'all all get to unmute yourselves now. If you've got
Yeah.
a burning question on your mind, please shout it out. And I will just add that both of y'all, you must both be very well aligned and balanced because your vocal stamina is so good that you just talked for an hour and a half without getting. So well done. Who's got questions for our presenters?
I've actually got a question.
Yes, Mary.
The evolving singing book, singing voice book, does that actually have my age in there?
Absolutely. And there's another book too, and I can't remember it now. It's Choral Pedagogy for the Aging Voice. I'll have to look it up, but I didn't include that in the works cited. But yes, absolutely. Karen Brunson carries it from birth to, womb to tomb, as they say in West Side Story, right? So, yeah, it's a great book.
Okay, cool. It's not a cheap book. Okay.
No, but most good
it's
books
a good
aren't.
investment. That's right.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We should start calling it the maturing voice instead of the aging voice.
I would definitely prefer that.
Yeah, yeah.
Josh.
So I think one of the things that I really enjoyed, especially in taking this course over the summer, having the I took a vocal pedagogy as my elective when I was an undergrad because I knew I wanted to do that. So to kind of take it from this perspective of what does that look like in front of a choir and not just as a voice teacher, I think that it's important as a conductor, if you have a church group or any kind of community group, that you are having to kind of switch between these hats. I think it's really easy for conductors, especially in school settings, to be like, all right, we got to learn this song and then this song and then this song, and you become a song teacher, and less about being a voice teacher, because you're going to be the only voice teacher that the majority of your students ever have. Obviously, this is thinking outside of the collegiate realm. So I think it's very important to kind of think about these ideas and balance them and kind of show them to our singers so that they have that vocal instruction in that choral rehearsal that's ingrained, and not here's the beginning of our rehearsal where we're going to learn about the voice and now let's go yell about it. One of which I think is very important is just the self-awareness, especially with the younger singers. When I was teaching, that was kind of the biggest thing that I wanted to instill them, because so many times when they are in their lesson, they think, okay, I'm thinking about myself. What is my body doing? What is this doing? And they're really engaged into that. And so you're able to make those shifts and those adjustments. And then they go into the choir room and they're listening to everyone around them and they're trying to find their place in it. And so they stop thinking and feeling and they switch to listening. So that was one of the things that I, especially working in a high school setting, in a voice lesson setting, was, when you go into the choir room, feel for this. What are you feeling here? What's going on right here? To kind of have that self-awareness that they then can take to the football game on Friday and say, maybe we shouldn't be screaming this loud. I think that was something that was very beneficial, at least for me, in working with my high school age students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I taught Josh in undergrad. He was my voice student, and now I'm teaching his baby brother. And his baby brother was telling me, and this is maybe one of the blessings in this time. We have to look for the blessings in COVID time.
Right.
But because they are so far spread out in rehearsals, Zach was telling me it's making him more self-aware of his technique.
Right.
I think that's the danger maybe in a choral ensemble, is that you stop listening to yourself,
Yeah.
and you need to be listening to yourself.
Yeah, it's both. And then the more that the technique is solidified, as you're saying, then you understand the feeling, you understand how loud you are singing in that group, because you know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And trusting that in that group. I know for my own self, this is as far as vocal health, and I love the fact that you're mentioning like counting up your points. I love to do that because I find myself now within larger groups having to speak louder.
Yes.
I do. We did get. I have a microphone now, which doesn't always work. But being cognizant about my own vocal health as a conductor as well, it's huge.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for spending a Saturday afternoon with us. Do you guys have any other thoughts or?
I'll just
Actually,
I just wanted to say, Loretta wrote in the chat. She said, "Great presentation, thank you."
Of course.
Oh,
So that's from Loretta.
Loretta.
Y'all are very thorough, and I loved that you talked about vibrato and that straight tone isn't inherently bad, but that the word is definitely a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, and it comes back to it's incumbent upon us to teach singers how to do or what they can do. Yeah. Craig, you were opening your mic?
yeah, there has been a lot of research done, and I think if you reach out to Jeremy or I or Dr. Wunderlich about this, about spacing in choir rehearsals and how it helps the choral singing blend. Dr. Mims did a presentation on what we're going to take on from our choral rehearsals now past COVID, once COVID is over, what we're going to learn from this. And maybe to mention to have these distanced and spaced rehearsals so singers can remember and sing their own voice before they're kind of bunched in together again.
Oh, totally, and I love in a normal situation without the mask. Mask is different currently, but in a normal situation, allowing singers to have more space. In my chamber singers, we can do that. When all of a sudden there's 60 of us all stuffed in, then it does harm as well. And so I would, in a great environment, having great space between and allowing a singer to fill your oral space, boy, it helps so much.
That's a really interesting point. I was just thinking back to experiences I've had in choirs where there's only 2 or 3 to a part, and you're standing in the semicircle and you're asked for straight tone. And I've always felt like I've had to like hold back. So I'm wondering now, with what you're saying, if we were spread out a little bit more, would I feel like I could use more voice or use more whatever and feel a little bit more like my own voice is able to come out instead of trying to hold in all the time?
Right, love that. Yeah, someday we'll be able to experiment with all of those things.
Yeah.
Someday.
Any other thoughts or discussion for our presenters or for the group from everyone? Well, Serena, or just talking to someone else. Okay, you're good. I wasn't trying to call you out.
Sorry, I'm surrounded by children.
It's okay.
Hi, guys. Oh, she hid. Okay.
Enjoy them while they're young. They grow up way too fast.
Well, thank you all so much for joining today. Thank you so much, Dr. Wunderlich and Dr. Mims. This has just been awesome today, and just a real, stoke in the fire of our professional lives here. So we really appreciate it, and thank you so much for this invigorating presentation. It has been so fascinating. It has been recorded. I will send the video or the link to the video out, as well as the Works Cited page and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation for us all to have and share with colleagues wherever we are. Some really, really good stuff here. So thank you both so much. A round of spirit hands for you. And without anything else, we will call this meeting adjourned, and we'll see you guys all soon. Thank you so much.
Bye.
See everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, guys.